Warning, these stories are told by grown-ups for an audience of grown-ups and may feature adult situations, so we've tried to take care to bleep any words that you might find offensive, but parents may want to watch the stories first and decide if they're appropriate for children. Finally, the views expressed in these stories are those of the storytellers alone and may not reflect the opinions or attitudes of Blue Ridge PBS or Echo TV. And now, enjoy the show.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to Hoot and Holler. Welcome. Welcome back if you've been before. Welcome for the first time if you haven't. We are so thrilled to be here, and thanks to Ian and the incredible Grandin staff, as always, for having us. I'm going to take a deep breath for a second. I've already cried off my false eyelashes several times, so I just gave those up. So it is what it is. Okay, so this night is so incredibly special to me personally as the curator and boss lady of Hoot and Holler for so many reasons. I have wanted to do this theme since I started Hoot and Holler 6 years ago. 6 years, we just had our anniversary. For so many reasons, these stories are critical. And I always ask my storytellers not to read their notes, but I'm going to read mine. So, excuse me. Each show that I prepare is so special. They're all so different. They all have these beautiful, unique flavors. And if you've come before, you know that. Who's been here before? And who's a first timer? Yeah! Welcome, welcome. So each and every show, the storytellers take up residence in my heart. And they start to take up residence in my entire being, in my body, and my family will attest, like they move into the house with me. I sleep on the couch, I'm thinking about them, I'm loving them, I'm checking in with them constantly. My entire mission with Hoot and Holler is making sure that every single storyteller feels safe in sharing their truths. That's what I do, that's my passion. This event has definitely changed me as a human being. Working with these 6 storytellers as they trust me to share their most vulnerable moments is my greatest honor, and with that comes great responsibility. It's my job to work tirelessly to ensure their safety and to help them tell the very best version of the story that they feel ready to tell. You'll see tonight that it is impossible not to fall in love like I have. My hope and intention is for those who might be bottled up inside out there, who might feel scared or alone, or feel unloved or unwanted, to see tonight how it can feel to stand in your truth. That's my goal. I've told these tellers that not only are they giving themselves permission to speak, but they in turn are bestowing a gift to all of you. You're fortunate to get to be a witness to these stories. And I ask you all to lean all the way in as you're listening. And I know you do, because Hoot and Holler audiences are legendarily the best. Listen with your hearts. Know that it is a brave and terrifying thing to stand up here and give them all the extra love you can, and I know that you will. And then, at the end, take what you feel in your heart and what you learn and spread it around the bigger world, because we need it. I say every time that I believe stories will save the world, and I think tonight you're going to see that in action. One more final thing before we kick off and I start crying before we even start again. I want to send all my love to the organizations that you see set up all around. These are people doing such critical work in our communities, and I want to thank them for being here on their own time and for even just existing in the world. First, of course, the Roanoke Diversity Center. The support and resources that they provide to our queer community is urgent and important and thankless. And I am so thrilled that they are receiving a portion of the proceeds tonight. So thank all of you for participating in that. And we'll hear more from them later. But on top of that, we also have Pride Sports, Southwest Virginia Pride, Transparent, Youth Saga, He, She, Z, and We. We have the Lean In Project, the Metropolitan Community Church, Mr. Microphone, and right here, standing by, Free Mom Hugs. Such a cool organization. So please take the time during intermission and after to say hi and learn more about these amazing human beings that keep these organizations going. Again, I thank the Grandin. Also, Blue Ridge PBS Echo is in the house recording us. Go PBS! I want to thank, of course, Sam Lunsford, my DJ and my left-hand man who who talks me down and helps me through to provide the soul and the music here. There's so many more, but now it's time to start the show. You'll hear from me again lots of times. Thank you for being here, and please enjoy Hoot and Holler. We love you. Everybody shake it off. I heard the Diversity Center has tissues. I hope y'all all picked some up. Be sure to get some. It's going to be that kind of night. All right. Okay. And without further ado, we begin the stories. Our first storyteller, first timer, is an intuitive artist with a wide range of media and expression. She is a writer primarily, but not exclusively, a poet, a visual artist with a focus on drawing and painting from her imagination and intuition. And she's also a dancer. She frequently offers play shops, not workshops, play shops, with the intention of holding creative spaces and gently guiding others back to their own inherent creativity. In addition to these play shops, she loves to practice and facilitate ecstatic dance in the Roanoke community. Please welcome first-time storyteller, leaning in, Charlotte Tara Dickey.
That's me. That's my dad, and that's my sister, and my mom's out there. One of the last conversations I had with my dad went like this. He said, "Are you happy?" This was a big question. It was an important question for him to ask me, for both of us. He needed to know, and I needed to tell him. I said, yes, yes, I am happy. I am so happy because I know who I am. And this is why the question was so big, because for far too long, I did not know myself. Not knowing myself, I could not show myself. And that means that my dad couldn't see me. How could he when I couldn't see myself? How could anyone when I couldn't make myself visible? The prefabricated checkbox labeled male obscured nearly all of me. The me that was seen was shallow, quiet, confused, withdrawn, and sad. This was real, not a facade. But this surface of me hid the depths. Underneath this sad armor, the visceral me raged, and my family did see that much of me. The anger, the loathing, the raging sorrow. Just checking my notes, Lee. So then, are you happy? Yes, yes, I know who I am, and I didn't before. I can see myself, and I couldn't for so long. Yes, I am happy. Good. I went on and on about my life, about how much energy I have now, how much I do and want to do, and how it's easy and natural to be now. Where before, there was so much confusion, hesitation, and exhaustion. So yes, yes, I am happy. And my dad said, good. You gotta be happy. Summer of 1993. Her name was Carrie, and she was punk rock. She chewed her fingernails, spat on the ground, and sneered at a lot, at just about everything. I had met her at church camp. And crushed on her hard. She didn't care about that. On the ride back home from camp, in the back of the church van, I stared at the frayed, wide hole in my jeans. Worn through BTW, not store-bought. And repeated this one forlorn thought to myself. I wish I was a girl. Repeating it over and over to myself for an hour, letting it come through, letting it be heard. And I was a girl, even then, in very significant ways. I always have been. Do you know how it feels when someone truly sees you? Like they get you, right? It's nice. I first saw myself clearly and consistently at 43 years of age. Almost 20 years before that, I had fallen hard in love. Not a crush, but love. Love at first sight, eternal flame love. I will move wherever you go, love. Her name was, and still is, Jennifer. She wore an earthy and fiery sundress when I first saw her. She was wiry, delicate, strong, and full of kindness. I knew this with one look. And she saw me. I think she saw me before I saw myself, more clearly than I saw myself. Even though it would be another 17 or 18 years before I was really able to show myself to the world, she saw me with clairvoyant love. We were both wayfish, raggedy, and lost. She was a little lost in relationships with boys and struggling with being a young woman in a misogynistic and violently patriarchal culture. And I was hidden away, lost within the projections of patriarchal masculinity onto my body, psyche, and spirit. We held hands and kissed a couple of years later, after watching Napoleon Dynamite on my couch. And that was the first time we'd ever hung out, just the two of us outside of work. And she had moved away, way far away, and come back to visit at Christmas. And 6 months later, I moved way far away too, and we started our life together. I proposed to her while we both sat on a sled in the snow under a pine tree. Nobody got down on a knee. We just sat on the sled like kids, and I offered her a ring, and she said yes. We were both super happy. Not long after that, we briefly talked about calling off the wedding. We didn't. That would have been heartbreaking and stupid. But the reason we talked about it briefly was because I had never told anyone that I was transgender before. And I told her. And I told myself. For the first time ever, I spoke words that tentatively named who I am. We were lying in bed, and with my back to her, looking at my eyelids or a wall, I said something like, "Sometimes I feel more like a woman than a man." A number of years later, I stood alone in the closet of our house here in Roanoke. I was dressed in a similar way to how I am now. At the time, this was still novel for me, wrapped in layers of complex emotions and the ongoing, and actively being smothered by the ongoing psychological trauma that comes with being a transgender and queer individual in a cisgender heteronormative culture. And something critically changed in that moment. I saw myself, and I was smiling back at me, and I said, with confidence and so much love and a voyeuristically tinged thrill of excitement, I am transgender. In the late summer of 2019, I was beginning to pull out of a debilitating depression. I had been depressed off and on most of my life, and this particular episode was brutal for me and my family. It lasted over 2 years, included a stay in a psychiatric hospital for suicidal ideation, and was accompanied by a steady diet of prescribed pharmacological drugs, including benzodiazepines and 250 milligrams of sertraline or Zoloft a day. Doctors usually don't prescribe more than 200 milligrams of Zoloft a day, because beyond that, it becomes potentially unsafe. And I was pulling out of it because I was finally not only accepting that I am trans, but embracing being trans. And I was ready to show up in this fucked up world every day as myself. Jennifer knew I was coming back to her. She could see and feel that. The weight in our house and family had shifted, and we were hugging each other, holding on to each other in our kitchen, a warm and loving, extended embrace. And she said, "I am so glad you're back." And I said, "I am too." And then I said, "I have to transition." And we both sobbed because we didn't know what would happen. On the winter solstice of 2019, I met my people, my tribe. This was not a gathering of trans or queer people. It was simply a gathering of very loving people. Circumstances had conspired over a few months now that I was coming out and transitioning to bring me and my family to this gathering, this event. And this was also the same day that I started hormone replacement therapy. My family didn't know what would happen when I transitioned. We only knew that I had to. What happened was this: me, visible, audible. I have a voice. I have a lot to say. Me, here, now. Since 2019, circumstances have continued to conspire to bring me more fully into alignment with who I am, my family and friends, and my purpose. It's actually not a conspiracy at all. It's life unfolding naturally, as it should, in a radical dance of freedom and sacred purpose.
Second storyteller, also a first-timer. We have been working really closely together, and I'm just so proud of her. I'm proud of everybody. She is a wife, daughter, sister, sister-in-law, aunt, niece, and friend. She's been a social worker for 17 years, and she taught social work courses as an adjunct instructor at Ferrum College from 2008 to 2019. I know she has a fan club here, too. She sits on the Social Work Advisory Committee at Ferrum, and she's a regional consultant for the Virginia Department of Social Services. She and her partner enjoy running their Airbnb called Coffee with the Cows. She enjoys spending time with her family, and she enjoys yoga, meditation, and taking drives in her Jeep named Pearl. Lean in, another brave one. They're all brave. Come on in. Welcome, Tiffany Ray.
Well, hello, beautiful friends. Hello. It is truly an honor to share this amazing space with you this evening. Thank you so much for being here. My partner frequently asks, why couldn't we have met 20 to 30 years ago? And I always say the same thing. I always tell her, honey, you really would not have liked me 20 to 30 years ago. It's true. There's no way that we could have been in a healthy, loving relationship at that time in my life. You see, I was a pretty far-right, judgmental person. Everything was right or wrong, black or white. There was no in-between for me. I was born in 1974 and raised in a conservative Christian home, and from the time that I was a couple of weeks old through my mid-20s, I was basically in church anytime the doors were open. Although I started to notice girls when I was around 10 or 11, I dated guys throughout high school and into my 20s. Throughout high school, I did not dare mention to anyone that I thought I may have crushes on girls. And honestly, I'm not sure I even understood what this was at the time. You know, Ellen hadn't come out yet. Rosie wasn't really on the scene. Not everyone had cell phones, and we didn't have social media. I mean, how do we survive, right? So I kept this to myself, and I frequently wondered what was wrong with me. Between the ages of 19 and 26, I was in relationships with a pastor's son and 2 pastors. Right? And I was engaged to 2 of these men. One of the pastors and I were engaged as he was going through the ordination process, and not only did he have to go before a panel of Nazarene ministers, I too had to endure the grueling panel interview process. And I had to answer some tough questions, such as your future husband is traveling as an evangelist, how are you going to support him when he's tempted by other women and when he struggles with pornography? Right? We both made it through the interview process individually and as a couple, and I was by his side during his ordination ceremony. I really cared for these men, and I believed that I was truly in love with one of them especially. But I was afraid that because of this very strong attraction and desire for women that I had, that our marriage wouldn't last. And divorce can be detrimental to a pastor's ministry, and I really did not want to go down that road. During this time, I also attended a Pentecostal Bible college in Ohio, where lively praise and worship, speaking in tongues, the laying on of hands, being slain in the Spirit, and hellfire and brimstone preaching were common practice. We were required to wear a skirt or dress, pantyhose, and a slip to class every day, and if the length of that skirt or dress appeared questionable, I promise you it was measured before you could step foot outside the dorm. It seems ironic that now I was choosing to be in a place where I was required to wear the very thing that had made me so uncomfortable as a young child. But I believed that as long as I had long hair, wore makeup, and dresses that no one could possibly find out, that struggle and battle that I fought within myself constantly. After graduating from Bible college, I moved to a very small town in southeastern Kansas, where I served as the youth minister of a Wesleyan church. I believed this was where I was supposed to be at the time, but I think I also believed that as long as I stayed connected with the ministry, somehow I would be okay. I was now 19 hours from home, and needless to say, this was quite an adjustment for me. But I settled in, I got to know the people, and I became close to this couple in the church and their children. The daughter was in the youth group, the husband was helping me with the youth group, and they basically took me in, would have me over for dinner frequently, and his wife and I would spend a lot of time talking. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, that attraction and desire to be close to women was still there. I couldn't shake it. And no matter how much I begged God to take it away, it was always there. The intensity of this was becoming more and more of an issue for me. I had applied and been accepted to begin at Ferrum College in the fall of 2001, as I wanted to pursue my degree in social work, and I wanted to be closer to my family again. And unable to bear the thoughts, attraction, and desires any longer, sometime in the spring of 2001, I went to the pastor who I was working under, and I told him what I had been struggling with for so long. I told him that I was attracted to women, and I was afraid I may be gay. I also told him that I had become emotionally close to the wife of that couple who had taken me in, and please understand, nothing had happened. However, what the pastor somehow took away from that conversation was that the husband of that couple and I had had an affair. Crazy, right? Within 2 weeks, I was to have my things packed and be ready to leave that church. I was devastated. Being in the ministry in the church was my life and my identity at that time, and I felt that my world was crashing in on me, and in that moment I felt more alone than I had ever felt before. And I was also angry, because I was finally trying to be honest about this part of me, and this pastor I had just confided in had totally dismissed what to me was the most important part of that conversation. While all of this was going on, Mom and Dad kept trying to call me and I wouldn't call them back. And normally I would talk to them every couple of days, and I went for close to 2 weeks without talking to them. Finally, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer because they were leaving voicemails that they were going to call the pastor and the police because they were afraid something had happened to me. Something had happened, but not in the ways they were thinking at that time. You see, I was scared to tell them I had been asked to leave the ministry in the church. Scared to tell them I'd had crushes on girls from the time I was 10 or 11. Scared to tell them I really just wanted them to come and get me because somehow I would be admitting defeat, acknowledging that something was really wrong with me. Scared they would disown me, and scared I was going to go to hell. With Mom and Dad on the other end of the phone and with close to 1,000 miles between us, I mustered the courage to tell them what I had been going through. In that moment, I could hear Mom crying on the other end. But crying because she was relieved. Relieved that I was alive, relieved that I hadn't been sexually assaulted, or any of the other horrible things they, as my parents, had been worrying about. Mom and Dad came to Kansas, loaded up my things, and brought me home, and I had never been so thankful to be home. And I really wish I could tell you that it was smooth sailing from there, friends, but I can't. I still tried to push the feelings down, still dated a few men, and I requested to be connected with an accountability partner through my church because I was determined I was going to beat this thing and I wasn't going to be gay, right? And for those who may not be familiar, an accountability partner is someone who I would do Bible study with, pray with, and talk to about what I was still struggling with. I was meeting with her weekly, and she told me that she did not want me to go to Ferrum College because Ferrum was too liberal. She was the second person to tell me this. She told me that her and her husband would pay for me to go to, guess where? You guessed it, Liberty University. I said, Liberty doesn't have an accredited social work program because at that time they didn't. She said, oh, that's okay, you can get a degree in counseling. Really? I told her I was not interested and I would be going to Ferrum College. I was not interested in being controlled by another well-meaning Christian. When I wouldn't repeat the sinner's prayer on command, she told me she questioned if I had ever truly been saved. I told her I did not wish to talk to her any longer. I would not be meeting with her again. I got up, I walked out of her house, and I never looked back. While in the social work program at Ferrum College, after I finally got there, my social work professors, Jenny West and Martha Haley Bowling, were very instrumental in helping me to really work on myself. They helped me to come out fully to my parents, and they have been two of my dearest friends for more than 20 years now. Going to Ferrum College was, in fact, one of the best decisions I have ever made. Now, I've had relationships with a few women, but I've been holding out for my person. In December 2019, I finally met her. In June of 21, I proposed, and she said yes. And on April 23rd of this year, I had the honor of marrying my beautiful wife, Monica Gregory, and I see you. April 23rd was a very special day to me, not only because I was marrying my person and my best friend, but because I also saw just how far my parents have come and how much they truly love me. As Mom and I were getting dressed before the wedding, I could see she was a little emotional, and I asked if she was okay. She hugged me, and then she squeezed me tight. She said, "My baby only gets married once." I said, "You're right, Mom, this is it for me." Mom and Dad both escorted me. Dad read scripture and prayed for us, and I had my dance with my dad in front of our family and friends. Through years and years of therapy and a lot of self-work, I have come to fully accept and love myself. And do you know what I noticed, friends? I noticed that during that very long period of time when I begged God to take away the attraction to and the desire for women, those times when I was so worried about what everyone else would think, I didn't feel as close to God. But when I finally accepted that part of me, I felt closer to God than I ever had in the past. I realized and I accepted that God does love me, regardless of what some well-intentioned Christians may want and choose to believe. But I have also learned that everything is not right or wrong. Everything is not black or white, and there's a hell of a lot in between. I have learned that we are all on our path, and what matters, friends, is that we are learning, growing, and becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be. Thank you.
He's a passionate, affordable housing advocate, a self-proclaimed home chef, and a proud queer man. In addition to his affordable housing work, he founded the Lean In Project, which has information out front. Please check them out. It's a community service organization providing advocacy and connection to resources for LGBTQIA folks in Southside Virginia. He currently resides in Richmond with his partner and fur babies. He's a second-time storyteller. He blew the roof off the place last time. Please welcome Liam Hudson.
Sitting in the Red Lobster of a dying mall, she looked at me with her eyes full of tears and said, "You're not doing anything permanent, right? I mean, you can dress however you want, but please don't tell me that you're actually trying to be a boy." "I haven't, Mom," I said. I shoved a cheddar biscuit so deep down my throat that I thought I was going to vomit. The meal ended in a sheepish hug. We both drove our separate ways, knowing that we just betrayed the authenticity of our relationship. A week later, I made an appointment. I drove from Roanoke to Fishersville. I got my first prescription for testosterone. My partner at the time jabbed an 1.5-inch needle in my ass, gave me a balloon that said, "It's a boy!" And that was it. The first time I remember knowing I was a boy, I was around 4 years old and sitting in the bathtub with my cousin. I pointed at his penis and said, "Where's mine?" My grandmother, my Mimi, took the opportunity to inform me of Southern anatomy, which meant that boys had ninkaworms and girls had noo-noos, and I had a noo-noo. Even still, I never really understood how we were different as children. I mean, I had the same scars on my legs from the time we climbed the oak tree in our front yard. I held the record for the most number of frogs caught in one summer. Okay? Thank you. But even still, he got all the best Christmas gifts, and he never had to cross his legs or wear those awful poofy dresses, and he never had to mind his manners at dinner. At 6, I decided that I'd had it with this whole ordeal. And so, standing in my parents' bathroom, my dad's beard trimmer in hand, suddenly all of my hair was on the counter in front of me. I emerged from the bathroom with a toothless grin and in my favorite t-shirt, only for my cousin to ask, "What'd you do that for?" "I'm a boy," I said, and we went off to play without another word about it. The elders in my family attributed this behavior to my only having male siblings and cousins. And my mother decided that the best approach to this was to up the number of dance classes that I was enrolled in per week and to initiate relationships with the mothers who were sure to ask for extracurricular play dates. However, I didn't really look like the dancers in my class. For starters, I've had the shoulders and the calves of a linebacker since like birth. And they weren't like particularly nice to me either. They made whomping noises whenever I did pirouettes. They once replaced all of my shoes with candy bars. One time when I was leaving, I overheard the ringleader say, "I heard she's gay and she's gonna touch us like we're not supposed to be touched." I didn't really know what any of that meant, but I sure as hell knew that they were not my friends, okay? Nevertheless, when I left that class, I told my mama everything she wanted to hear, okay? Everything bad that had happened in that dance class was suddenly the best thing that could have happened. When I asked my mother what gay meant, I saw her hands grip the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, and through her teeth she gritted, "Happy." My mama looked anything but happy to have heard that word come out of my mouth. In the 3rd grade, a boy sat beside me as we ate push pops and said, "You don't really look like the other girls in our class. You even have short hair. I mean, you kind of look like a boy." Although this time, it wasn't a defect, it just was. As I got older, the pressure to conform to societal norms of what a young woman should look like, think like, be like, dress like, intensified. And I tried with the best of my ability to conform to those norms. High school was super easy for me. As a closeted queer youth with major people-pleasing tendencies who isn't from an intensely religious family in Southern Virginia, I had absolutely zero trauma to report from that time in my life. In the 9th grade, my best friend kissed me after our friend's party. For 3 years after, we would secretly navigate the intensity of teen love and the intense feelings of shame that we both felt in our attraction to one another. Hiding our relationship was both difficult and painful. This example of love, the kind that only exists behind locked doors and in shadows and in between longing glances, would shape my perception of what love should look like for me well into my 20s. I did not know that it was possible to love someone out loud and without shame. When my parents sent me to historically women's college, they believed it would help me become a proper lady. I learned a lot about the proper ways to be with a lady, but not a whole lot about being one. For years, I had two separate wardrobes, the one for me and the one for the person that I was expected to be. The university became my place of refuge, and really the only place in the first place that I felt comfortable exploring myself as a queer individual for the first time in my life. The first person to ever call me transgender was the dean of students, who brought me into her office and explained that I had been reported by a fellow student for behavior that violated the code of conduct. You are aware this is a women's college for women, she began. So I can say that it is safe to assume you would not be participating in any behavior that could potentially compromise your position here. I nodded along in shock, without fully processing the gravity of the words that she just said to me. For the remainder of my time there, I quietly played my role on the exterior and organized like hell down below. I conspired with and helped draft a student-written policy, thinking surely the university would ease up if it were a majority student-led effort. Nope. And so almost weekly, I sat in the office with an assuming dean of students and answered the same questions over and over. When I reported a sexual assault my junior year after a dance with a neighboring school, the report was almost immediately dismissed once I disclosed that I'd been in the men's restroom. Though the administration never acknowledged the assault, they made a point to remind me that if I hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time, none of this would have ever happened. Right, thank you. In 2018, I joined an advisory board for the university who was in their fourth revision of the transgender policy in under a decade. It took a solid 3 months to get everyone on board with the fact that transvestite is no longer a term we use. In the end, the two trans men sitting on the board were told that allowing trans men who were previously admitted to the university as women to remain and graduate under their preferred names and pronouns would be an abomination to the sanctity of women's education. And very little about the policy changed. For many years, I deeply internalized the hatred that I received for being a transgender man. I believed that the shame of my family was mine to carry. I endured people constantly telling me how burdensome it was for them to learn new names and pronouns. Doctors and medical providers looked at me like I was an alien, and at a lot of times refused to provide me health care. I did not think I deserved a partner who loved me for the body that I existed within. At my lowest point, I was forced to quit my job for refusing to use the women's restroom and experiencing intense and deliberate harassment from my supervisor. I lived in my car for almost 2 months before telling anyone. For most of my life, I believed that I was the only person I mattered to, and that I was the only person who would ever accept me as my full self. And let's be real, even I didn't accept me as my full self. My life became one toxic cycle after the other. I thought about the relief that would come with death more times than I can count. Once, after a typical night out, I stood in the middle of Williamson Road and hoped a car would turn the corner and take it all away. My friend pushed me out of the way as a truck came barreling down the hill. What the fuck, dude? Are you trying to die? I didn't say yes, but my legs didn't move quickly enough to say no either. If I had told 20-year-old Liam that 31-year-old Liam is married and has finished college and then went back and has a job he enjoys where he is openly queer and has friends who accept him and has started a nonprofit where he gets to help queer babies not feel so alone and is in therapy and actively healing that and gets to hug his mother as himself. Thank you. Liam at 20 would not have believed the Liam standing before you today. He would have laughed at you. He would have said it's impossible. I do not know what made younger Liam hang on, but I am profoundly glad that he did, and I am so proud of him. Thank you. I will not say that my life as a transgender man is easy, even with the privileges that I have today standing before you. Pretty much any time I open the news, it seems like some politician is attacking trans people. I do not feel safe using almost any public restroom. I am always afraid of being followed and harmed and outed. I still receive a lot of subpar medical care. But even still, it is worth it to be here in front of all of you today as the most authentic version of myself yet. And for the first time, I see myself and I see a future as my whole self. To all of the allies in the audience, I say to you, show up. For real. Stop just saying you're showing up on social media. Show up for real. Vote queer people into places of power. Advocate for your friends. Educate yourselves. Stop pretending not to hear those people in your family that you overlook at holidays. Show up. We are hurting. People are attacking us. There are still those of us who believe that they should hate themselves because the world tells them to. Show up. And to all of my queer people in the audience, especially the young ones, I want you to hear me very loudly when I say that you belong. You are not a burden. You deserve to take up all of the space that you require. You deserve a life where people love and cherish you, not despite who you are, but because of it. You deserve a life where you are not expected to come out because you were already living out loud. I love you all, and I hope that for all of you. And I hope that tonight you are inspired and you show up for the queer people in your lives, because we are here and we are out loud and we are very proud, and you should be proud of us too.
Yes! Liam Hudson! Our next storyteller. She corrected me because I called her a millennial, and she was like, I am Gen Z. So I was like, sorry. And that's really important to have that voice here tonight, Gen Z. She's an activist and organizer. Her pronouns are she, they. She has worked with the survivors of Parkland on a panel discussion about gun violence. She did work in Iowa for Bernie in 2020. And currently is working with Planned Parenthood nationwide on survivor outreach. Yes. They are currently organizing against Youngkin's anti-trans school policies. And is working closely with Joe Cobb, who we'll hear from next, and school board to ensure schools are welcoming and safe for all students. First-time storyteller, Gen Z voice of a generation. Please put your hands together for Caroline Garcia.
The process of coming out is a uniquely personal experience. It can never be repeated, but it always rhymes. I personally only share my story and identity with a few people because of the fear that follows. But today, I am more than ready to share my full story, the beautiful and the ugly. The truth is so important, and it is really hard coming to terms with your identity, but it can be beautiful. Many people know who they are at a young age, and they have a head start from the rest of us, and it doesn't take long to know that something's different, or you know that you're different from your peers. It's just hard figuring out why. I knew at an early age that I was born in the wrong body, but it took me a very, very long time to give that why a name. I remember my wish on my 3rd birthday. I closed my eyes real tight, and I repeated in my head, "Tomorrow I'll wake up as a girl." My wish was simple. I wanted to be myself. But it didn't take long for me to realize that that wish wouldn't come soon, and the solution wouldn't be so fast. It took many long nights of wonder, fear, and questioning, all before my 4th birthday. My mom could sense that I was struggling with something, but she didn't know the answer either. But she took me out to get Disney princesses dresses and Dollar Tree plastic high heels they had at the time, Bratz dolls, and my favorite Monster High dolls. She helped me free myself. We had an understanding, though, that this had to stay home because of the area we are in. The reality was so hard to understand as a kid, but we were in Texas, and it was the early 2000s. All I ever wanted was to be myself, and all my mom ever wanted was for me to be happy. So she established a safe place for me, and it lasted. In the summer of 2008, we moved from Texas, Port Neches, Texas, to Roanoke, Virginia. It was an exciting adventure for a 6-year-old who thought the word recession was the name of another city. Nonetheless, it was a fun journey, but it also meant new roles. I couldn't wear what I wanted to or play with what I wanted to anymore. Although my family was extremely open-minded and tolerant, it was new for them to see me in dresses and play with dolls. Some people even talked about my mom, saying that she might have failed as a single mother, but there was lack of mention of the lack of acceptance in society. And my family made jokes about my self-expression and told me I should be more manly and encouraged me to do sports to toughen me up. And I was signed up for sports. But I realized at a young age that I hated that because it was a forced activity meant to diminish me from budding. I realized that it taught me to hide myself. And it taught me to fear the world. I know it's never my fault, but the truth is, when you're told that at a young age to hide, it snowballs into self-hatred and fear, thus creating a toxic pattern that cannot be broken. The sentiment of me not being manly enough bothered my father the most, though. He felt like he failed as a father, and he punished me for any sign of feminine behavior, going as far as making playful threats about what would happen if I came out as queer. My father would give me a buzz cut every time I saw him and sign me up to 4 to 5 sports and activities at a time to give me no opportunity to stay at home and be myself. I lost that safe place I had with my mom, and I faced abuse that you hear about over and over again. When my little sister was born, we went home to get my stepmom's stuff and bring it to the hospital. It was during that time we got into a disagreement, and I started crying. He punched me in the face and stated that I was being too feminine. I was in 3rd grade. Sadly, that wasn't the last time, and it got so bad that one time I questioned whether I would make it out alive. My trauma developed into self-hatred and fear, and I remember punishing myself physically before I was 10. I hid myself from the world because I knew I would face violence. But when my mom came and got me, I felt relief, I felt freedom, and I felt safety for the first time in an extremely long time. It wasn't until I was in 8th grade when I watched Orange is the New Black. I know, I was too young to watch at the time. But I learned a name of my superpower, and it was through watching Laverne Cox. I was so interested, and I started following up with interviews and articles, and I remember the Time cover she had. And then immediately after, Caitlyn Jenner came out, and for the first time, I saw myself represented in media. As my mom and I watched the interviews and TV shows, we had conversations, and we learned more about the word trans in the world. I knew I was trans, and I told her, but I decided to wait because I was about to enter high school, and I knew the violence that followed. But during that time, I surrounded myself with other queer students, and we had conversations of our own, and that exposure made me feel less like an alien. It made me feel normal for once in my life. When I got to high school, I found a new friend group. They were popular, and we were all quietly queer. I confided in one of them at the time that I was going to transition after high school, and I told her why and the safety that followed and why I decided to wait. But with high school drama that followed, she decided to tell everyone as a way to spite me. I remember one of my friends coming up and asking me about it, and I got this paralyzing anxiety, and I said, I never said that. Why would I say something like that? I remember I felt forced, and I came out as gay, and I felt like I stole valor from a community I was not truly a part of. I remember crying that night knowing I could not stand up and defend my own identity. I remember I wanted comfort so badly that I allowed myself to suffer deeply. I was punishing myself again, and I was so angry with myself, and I promised to never tell anyone again. When COVID-19 happened during my senior year of high school, I remember being so happy because now I had time to explore my identity, my gender, my sexuality, and everything in between. I remember it started with conversations with my mom and sister. It came down to talking about what to do with my hair, my big identity, and painting my nails and doing my makeup and late night trips to Target. I remember being so happy to wear masks because I could hide myself from anyone who knew me before. I knew I was inching closer to that finish line, and I was so excited. We redid my room, we got lots of makeup, we got clothes, and then graduation was here. I remember standing awkwardly in front of the TV, and any Gen Z out there, Girl in Red was playing, and I remember telling everyone I was trans, and my new pronouns. My heart stopped for a moment, and I looked at everyone's face, but it didn't matter anymore because I was Caroline Garcia to the world, and nothing could change that. Now, I do want to give trigger warnings to this part. It gets a little bit more deep and harder topics. Before I transitioned, I didn't have conversations with adults about being queer because it wasn't normalized. I didn't have older, mature queer people guiding me, so I was doing things underage that I knew I shouldn't have. When I did things with older people and told them my age, people in college or graduated college, I remember they encouraged it. And it got to the point where alcohol felt freeing for me. I joined a new friend group, and we would party and go out every weekend and holiday and birthday, and when we weren't partying, we were drinking, and when we were partying, we were drinking. I was 17, and I didn't know better. I was watching my friends, and I wanted to be like them, but I was having my own crisis, and I wanted an escape. When I turned 18 and transitioned, I realized a lot of men out there love to fetishize trans women, and it made me super uncomfortable. Some people love us in private and then hate us vocally in public, and that's true for many Republican politicians. When I decided to be sexual and have sex, I remember that was the same. People vocalized their enjoyment during and then after, say how they felt weird or they were having their own identity crisis, or in some cases using me to explore. But in other times, they would praise me and tell me I was beautiful. I got addicted to that feeling. I wanted to be loved and feel beautiful and be pretty. And just like alcohol, I turned towards sexual activities as my new escape because I was finally beautiful, pretty, and loved. I knew how to be safe and smart, but the mental high got so exhausting and distracting that other things could happen. I realized my sexual activities weren't the smartest a little bit after that, and I decided I wouldn't do that as a way to feel beautiful. I instead relied on nature and art and myself to be beautiful because that's all that it takes. When I went to hang out with a friend, it was a mutual friend that knew me before I transitioned, but not after. And I remember vocalizing that this wasn't sexual, that this was not a romantic hang, that it was strictly platonic, and he agreed. I remember we had deep conversations and talked about a lot, but that was a lie because he sexually assaulted me that night. He made threatening comments about what would happen when my siblings or parents would wake up and hear me and come into the room and know that I was nothing more than a whore. But the worst came when he found out I was trans. See, I disclosed my transness to people who are sexual partners. And I told him that, but he got so angry, and I knew that night I would not make it out alive. I left my body, and I was no longer a person. And I was just an object, and any emotion would go punished. Afterwards, I went to my friend's house and I was bawling on her floor, and I realized there's no other way to put this besides paralyzing self-apathy. And that hit. And I knew I had to act quickly or I was not going to be alive much longer. After connecting with one of my educators at Planned Parenthood, we sat down in her office and we cried. I love you, Melinda. And we cried, and I was coming to terms with everything, and we contacted Sarah, a local organization, and I decided to go out and get a rape kit done. Remember, we sat there for 9+ hours, and my phone was on 1%, and I did not mind because I wanted justice. The following days, I got in contact with Laura from Sarah, who's also here, and we spent the following days and nights calling because I had to understand my new normal, and I had to work through it. She got me a meeting with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office in Roanoke County, and she saw me stand up and use my anger, my frustration, my hurt, and tell them everything, and see their stupid lies and their excuses. And she did the same for me. She stood up for me. And at the end of it, they told me, "Oh, Caroline, you would have a great career in law." They said, "Oh, we'll call you in a week." As of April 2021, they have not called me in a week, and I have called almost every day. That time was one of the hardest on my journey. And coming out to people became fearful. Coming out can become violent. And trans people disproportionately face violence and sexual assault. Every year is the deadliest for trans people, and the fear existing openly can become an act of violence. But for me, it's a revolutionary act. Being trans, it's ugly and it's hard, but it's exciting. Some people use the butterfly metaphors. You're a caterpillar, and then you cocoon during your self-exploration, and then you're yourself and proud of your identity. But it's not so cut and dry for me. I use a galaxy's metaphor. I'm always changing, ever changing, and always growing and evolving. And just like galaxies, that will happen until I don't exist anymore. And that's what my journey has been. It's been ever changing and always growing. And I'm so thankful. And I'm so thankful to have found love at a beautiful and peaceful moment in this journey. And I'm so thankful he educates people along the way. I remember when our relationship first started, his parents were riddled with transphobia and hate, and they told him that they wish he would just come out as gay because it would be easier for them to take in because they were from a small rural area. And he said, "No, I'm straight and I love her. She's a woman and you're going to accept it." The following months, his siblings and him sat down with them, educated them, talked to them. And now they donated money to organizations in Florida that help fight the Don't Say Gay bill. And now they're donating money to people in Virginia fighting Youngkin's disgusting policy. And they're working to end their pattern of beliefs. That is what trans has been for me. It's been the good and it's been the bad. But I'm not hiding anymore. It took me long enough to find myself and be myself. So revolutionary is the only way I will exist. Thank you.
As a young child who grew up in Kansas, one of his parents' initiation rituals was the annual viewing of The Wizard of Oz, in which he kept a pillow nearby to block his terror in watching Miss Gulch turn into the Wicked Witch. Well, now the pillow has been thrown away, and this fierce advocate has even turned the Wicked Witch into a badass ally. Please welcome our beloved City Council member, Mr. Joe Cobb.
Come out, wherever you are, and meet the young lady who fell from a star. She fell from the sky, she fell very far, and Kansas, she says, is the name of the star. Again, please. Oh, Lee, we've got some work to do. She brings you good news, or haven't you heard? When she fell out of Kansas, a miracle occurred. Well, my miracle occurred when on November 1st, 2001, after driving 1,125 miles from Wichita, Kansas, in a big, bright yellow 34-foot Penske truck, I parked in front of 1324th Street Southwest and stepped out into my technicolor world of Roanoke, Virginia, my new home. I felt like Dorothy did after enduring a tornado, watching Miss Gulch turn into the Wicked Witch, and then landing with a thud in Oz. And all my mind and my body could say was, "Oh, I didn't know a soul. I was a stranger in a strange land. The yellow brick road lay open before me, and I had to take each step." And so tonight, I want to share with you a few things I've learned about coming out along the yellow brick road. First, listen to your inner voice of love. Then, connect it to your brain. I knew when I was 10 years old that something was very special about me. Something unique and wonderful and unrepeatable. And it all began with a visit to Austin, Texas, to see my Uncle Ray in a play called There's a Girl in My Soup. Now, this play happened to star Judy Carn. Do any of you remember Judy Carn, the Laugh-In Girl? Yeah, this was a big deal. I got to see and meet Judy Carn. Well, that was pretty cool. But what was really cool was when I got to meet my Uncle Ray's roommate, Rob. Oh. Rob had shoulder-length, brown, curly hair, deep brown eyes, and a sweet smile. He was wearing a light blue denim shirt, sleeves rolled up just above his elbows, showing strong wrists and hands. His shirt tails hung down over his jeans, and at the end of his long legs were beautiful brown feet. Whew. Rob sat on the couch, and my vision, my plan, was to sit right next to him. But I'll be damned if that plan wasn't shattered by my two devious sisters, one of whom proceeded to sit on his lap, and the other who sat on his right. I was relegated to a seat next to my sister on the couch. I'd forgotten about this moment until one day, after some 26 years later, after I'd done a blitz of coming out to my parents and my siblings and my wife and my children, all of my family, I was driving on the interstate, and out of the blue, I remembered this moment, like an awakening into what I was becoming. I was 10 years old when I met Rob. I saw a beauty in him, which all these years later helped me see a beauty within my own soul. As difficult as it was to tell my family, I had to tell myself to realize that this beautiful truth within me could only be made real if I believed it myself. This was part of listening to my inner voice of love. So in my 36th year of life, while I was sitting in a Queen Anne chair in my therapist's office, I told her I am struggling with homosexuality. And then I waited. I waited for what I expected to be a barrage of platitudes and you can't be's and we can get you into conversion therapy. Instead, she paused and she looked into my eyes and she simply said, I'm honored that you shared your struggle with me. The gift she gave me in that moment aligned my head with my heart and sent me on down the yellow brick road. A year later, on our 13th wedding anniversary, my then wife, Leanne, and I went to Borders Books and Music to browse. We had been working the whole year with a marriage and family therapist to try and determine the best way forward in our relationship. And I was still trying to make sense of my sexual orientation. Well, when we arrived at the bookstore, she went to the music section. I made my way over to poetry. And I picked up a little slim volume of Emily Dickinson. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. I looked up and down the aisle of science fiction and mystery. And a clerk walked toward me, followed by two men. The third man wore a red bandana, brown curls of hair peeking out from beneath. And as he turned the corner between mystery and science fiction, he winked and smiled. And I nearly dropped Emily Dickinson. That moment was terrifying and liberating. And this brings me to the second thing I've learned about coming out. Listen to your heart. It will always lead you in the way of love. When my wife and I agreed to separate and then divorce in 1999, we were sitting together on a couch in our living room with our divorce papers spread out on the coffee table in front of us. We were showing the house. In fact, there was a realtor guiding a couple through the house, and our kids were just running around playing, and there were boxes everywhere. And as we talked about our pending divorce, we made a new vow. We committed to each other that we would act and speak in loving ways toward each other and about each other for the sake of our children and for the sake of our own health and wholeness. That vow changed our lives and our families and ended up setting us both free to love more deeply. Yeah. And then, as one last step I needed to take to set myself free from an institutional system that would never let me be who I was meant to be, on July 4th, 2001, I stood over my dining room table. I took into my hands the frames holding my credentials as a United Methodist clergy. I turned them over on the table and I placed them. Taking an X-Acto knife like a surgeon, I carefully cut open the brown paper backing, lifted the paper, set it aside, then lifted the ordination certificates out of the frames and placed them into an envelope along with a letter addressed to the bishop, sharing that I could no longer serve as a clergy in a church that couldn't fully welcome my gifts. The next day, I drove 2.5 hours to Topeka, Kansas, and hand-delivered them to the bishop. July 5th became my day of independence. It was then that I moved to Roanoke, and then I learned the third lesson of coming out along the yellow brick road. Listen to those who love you the most because they are willing to learn with you and keep loving you. When I was considering moving to Roanoke, a dear friend of mine in Wichita said, "Joe, why on earth are you moving to the South to come out?" Short answer, love. To be close to my children, Emma and Taylor. They are two of the wisest, most loving people I know. And they helped me create a pathway for healing with my former in-laws, their grandparents, and taught me several important things through the years. First of all, Dad, we love you even more because you are who you are meant to be. Second, thanks to you and Mom, we want to be the kind of people that people can feel safe coming out to. Isn't that cool? And finally, and this is probably the most important, we want to thank you, Dad, for introducing us to the classic film that has truly transformed our lives, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Truth be told, all 4 of my children are gifts to this world, and they are already creating a safe place in their own ways to welcome their peers and others who are on the journey of coming out. But finally, along the yellow brick road, I've learned this. Listen to the courageous voice within. It will take you to places you never imagined, and you will soar. You see, like Dorothy who went before us, we don't really need a scarecrow or a tin man or a cowardly lion to discover the gifts we already carry inside. We just need to come out to the fullness of who we are meant to be. And this is what I know. Coming out set me free. Coming out led me to embrace my inner beauty and reflect it into the world. Coming out brought me to Roanoke. Coming out led my family into a transformative and healing experience. Coming out led me to my new love, James, who I was legally able to marry 5 years ago on the rooftop of Center in the Square. Coming out led me to run for city council and to be elected as our city's first openly gay vice mayor. Coming out empowers me every day to advocate for our city to be a place of welcome and inclusion for everyone who wants to call Roanoke home. And coming out leads me to stand with our trans youth and their families. But I will tell you, and I will be honest with you, that none of this is easy. It's the hardest work I've ever done and will ever do, and lest you think the challenges have gone away or the threats diminished, just last week I received this message on my professional Facebook page. Joe Cobb continues to commit sodomy. So he is an active sinner and lawbreaker. God condemns the acts that he indulges in as a detestable sin. I am a child of God, will not vote for an active sinner and lawbreaker. After I saved a copy of the post, then proceeded to report the poster to Facebook for lewd content and blocked him from ever posting on my page again, I decided to reimagine the statement. That's how you reclaim power. Joe Cobb continues to commit acts of love. So he is a rule breaker for the sake of justice, equity, and inclusion. God created Joe in God's image and calls him good. I am a child of God, and I will vote for those who lead with love. As we know from the stories tonight, coming out is becoming who we are meant to be all along. Authentic, beautiful, and courageous. We are gifts, not to be covered in shame or compromised because of someone else's ignorance or short-sightedness. And no matter the voices around us or within us chanting their taunts, we must remember that the only voice that matters is the voice in here, inspired with a divine spark that says over and over again, I am beloved, you are beloved, we are beloved, and may we always remember this.
Doesn't anybody believe me? Of course we believe you. But anyway, Toto, we're home. Home. And this is my room. And you're all here. And I'm not going to leave here ever again. Because I love you all. Oh, Annie M. There's no place like home.
Love you. Thank you.
You are beloved. We are beloved. And we're going to spread that message, aren't we? Yes. This concludes this incredible night of story and soul-lifting, what do I say, gospel? I don't know what the word is, But thank you all so much for showing up and leaning in. You cannot believe the way it feels up here to have you all out there. You can't believe it. So thank you. I want to thank the Grandin, all these beautiful organizations, Blue Ridge Echo, Sam Lunsford, so many other people. Oh my gosh, hello, the Roanoke Diversity Center. So important. But mostly, I want to bring these storytellers back up here. Come on, y'all. Come on, Jezebel and Michael and all the voices of what is real and true and alive in this community. How brave were these stories? How brave? How brave?